are. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. We're gonna have a good time. I'm in a musical frame of mind because my friend Gary's here.
Woo woo!
We've been waiting for you, Gary, for all
Yay!
this time.
Hi, everybody.
I am thrilled, absolutely thrilled to be able to let you guys, you people, beautiful people, spend some time tonight with one of my dearest friends, Gary Malkin. And you you have heard his music. All of you have heard his music, some of you countless times, and have been moved by his music. And, I have to say that I really don't know where I would be with our meditations and with the channelings without Gary's music, because they all kind of came together at once. Yes, I was channeling before, but it it helped me release and relax into the process so that I opened farther, really buoyed on the wings of Gary's music, and that made all of this possible. It's been this incredible alchemy, and I know that I'm not the only one who's moved by the music and buoyed by the music, but it's so amazing how meditation after meditation after meditation, it just comes together, and it's hard to explain, but you've all heard it, so you know what I'm talking about. And I'm not in charge of any of that. That's just how it happens. It's almost as if the beings who are coming through know the piece of music before it's even played, and they know when to speak, and they know how to pace it, and they know when to end it. Unbelievable. Anyway, Gary Gary has had a very interesting life, and I hope that you all took the opportunity to look on his bio to see his awards and just the breadth of his work. And we'll touch a little bit, we'll touch on his work tonight, but really, Gary, we want to get to know you. We want to lift up the hood and find out what's in that genius brain of yours and that magnificent heart of yours, and and just find out, what makes you tick. So here he is, Mr. Gary Malkin. Welcome, welcome, welcome,
Drum
Gary.
roll, please. Thank you, Cleveland. I
Yay!
love you. Yeah. Hi,
Thank you.
everybody.
I know how busy you are, and so this is kind of a big deal to wedge in, because believe me, everybody, to get a meeting with Gary, you have to really plan. Um, he's very much in demand, and so we're fortunate, very fortunate to have you here tonight.
I'm honored to be here. I love you.
Yeah, I love you too.
I
And
deeply
so
respect and honor your work as well.
thank you. Um, so really, let's talk a little bit. To this month, our theme is acceptance, and I started to write the newsletter, and I realized this topic is really an entire book because there's so many facets to acceptance. Some that are a little on the surface, and some that are extremely, extremely deep. So one thing, though, that I did write about was how acceptance is really the first step in change, in any kind of change. We first need to look at something square in the face, and then surrender, you know, emotionally surrender the truth of that, and the old patterns, the old styles, the old ideas that brought us to that place. And then the next step is considering the new steps, the new how will we step forward. But we can't leapfrog over acceptance and surrender, acceptance being the number one thing. So that's one aspect of acceptance. And I why I chose you is because I know you pretty well, and I know your story pretty well. And I know how dedicated you are to your own evolution. I don't know that you would use that term, but it's the term I use.
I would use that.
Um, and in your dedication, you seem to always be coming up uh, to a moment of accepting new information for yourself. And then how am I going to work around that? How am I going to deal with it? So talk a little bit for yourself of, just in terms of your experience, how acceptance has been a part of your life.
I really love the fact that I didn't even know it was about acceptance because I wasn't paying attention yesterday when I read the newsletter. And I loved, what is this theme about? Moments before this started, which is perfect. Because, it's really ironic. One of one of the ways in which, I mean, it's pretty remarkable you picked me for this theme because one of the themes that Michael Stillwater and I created when we first launched the work Graceful Passages, which is arguably what most people know after in my post Hollywood career know most because it's touched almost 1 million people worldwide, is this phrase that we developed early on called integrative acceptance. And it was a word we used to refer to the kind of acceptance that happens that is beyond the cognitive, but inclusive of the heart and the soul and the body. So the integrative acceptance had a lot to do with the acceptance of our mortality as more than a cognitive act, right?
Yeah.
A true surrender to the humility of being a grain of sand in a cycle that requires our disappearance on a regular basis. Regular meaning geological time, every 80 to 100 years. So that acceptance. But there's another reason why this is really particularly synchronistic, is that I had probably arguably one of the most important breakthroughs of my evolutionary journey in the last 20 years. Um, from a workshop I did with the people that I do work with. I work with legendary warriors of light, legendary work, mentoring and coaching. That Clint Rogers' brother, Gerald, you guys have met Clint. So Clint Rogers' brother and his wife, Gerald and Allison, are people I've been doing a lot of journeying and evolutionary ceremony with in different countries all over the world the last 2 years. And in one of the treats we did, where they were asking, what are you seeking to achieve in these 10 days? And, for me, it's always been about this elusive relationship with self-love, where it's just been really, I've just had such a hard time finding a way to love myself.
Yeah.
My whole life it's been so elusive, because I was so traumatized as a child. And so my whole definition of getting love required constantly jumping through hoops to feel like I had to earn it. And it was never good enough, and I was never good enough. And it was one of the areas of great source of pain in my life personally. So the beginning of this workshop, which happened, I think, last September, it turned out within 24 hours, I realized, no, I don't want self-love at the end of these 10 days. What I want is radical self-acceptance. Like I want to accept myself so much that I want to fall in love with the being called Gary Malkin. Like warts and all, you know what I mean? And sure enough, what happened in those next 10 days was so phenomenally magical and profound that, like, drop dead, can't believe God exists and there's no question he knows my address, he or she knows my address, is that I actually passed through the portals into into a direct experience of acceptance, of self-acceptance, that changed my life. So on all kinds of levels, this word has an enormous amount of meaning and has a lot of entry points for. The other thing I wanted to say, that's just another synchronistic reason that you picked the word. I'm known in my childhood as someone that was very attached to what outcomes I wanted. Like everybody knows, like for a true spiritual evolutionary path, you need to have release attachment to outcome. It's one of the, it's one of the standard things that everyone says, right? Well, I must have been blessed or cursed with a phenomenal program that just had no idea what that was like. And it took forever for me to understand that true liberation is releasing attached to alchemy. So when this friend wrote a book, and the name of the book, just I looked at it and I immediately went like, oh God, do I know what that feels like? And it's a perfect description. It's called expectation hangover. And I would like to say that a lot of my journey in my spiritual evolutionary journey has been around allowing myself to not have so many expectation hangovers all my life, right? So there's both a professional meaning with regards to accepting our mortality as a gateway into a more radical experience of flow that is the centerpiece of our workshop that we're going to be announcing tonight. Very excited about that. You guys will hear more about that later. There's this whole personal evolutionary meaning around around radically self-accepting yourself, and that is not a mental process, but it's a spiritual one that where you pass through the veils of seeing yourself through God's eyes rather than your ego's eyes, you know. And then there's this whole idea about integrative acceptance of learning. I think I said that the first time. Anyway, there's all kinds of places where this word means a lot to me. Um, and also the other one is the Byron Katie work, the loving what is, the acceptance of what is as the path to liberation and freedom. So this is a great subject.
It
Wonderful.
is, and you've just taken us, into four categories. That's what I mean. It's so multifaceted,
Right.
and there and different levels of depth with it.
But
Kind
I tell you one thing also, that one of the great, and I have no idea whatever I have gone through, which is kind of under the heading of don't try this at home and do it and take my advice and don't suffer my way. Do it, sidestep it so you don't have to do it the way I've done it. If you can get some benefit from my life story or my life lessons, I would be very happy. But what I want to say is that this idea of getting that who you are required every single fall, failure, mistake, things that you thought you were that were horrible, unacceptable shortcomings, and they were they're when you look back now, they're so meticulously designed for the awakening that is necessary for me to be liberated. So that means that every fall, every mistake, every faux pas, and I've done a lot of very exposed to the world faux pas because I've always been a very transparent, extroverted person, right? And I've made some mistakes where I just fell flat on my face in full view. And I think it gave me kind of an Olympic sized acceptance training camp to go through all my life. Not that I want to say I'm larger than, I'm not talking about better. I'm saying it's been very dramatic in learning how to be an everyman, in demonstrating the power of falling on your face and learning that the resilience that comes from picking yourself up again and not allowing yourself to get bitter and not allowing yourself to let the trauma define you, and to turned out that is what was my route to self-love, was seeing, damn, what a strong, resilient mother blank woo you I am. I finally got to see, man, it takes a lot to destroy your joie de vivre and your spirit and your optimism and your hope. You just fall down and you get up. Sometimes it takes a few months when I was really devastated one time, but I always get up and I always come back and I'm always better because of it. So I hope this is relevant. Is it?
Absolutely. Yes, yes. It's exactly where we're going with this topic and why I wanted to dive into it with you.
Well, and I love how death is a metaphor that is referenced in every breath, in every note on the piano, in every day where we wake up and we go to bed, the la petite mort, the sleep of, the little death. In a way, acceptance is the digestive enzyme and principles by which death exists in our lives in a way that becomes a catalyst for our growth. So acceptance is part and parcel with the life force of something that comes, it quickens, it rises, it dies. Acceptance is a required skill set for the evolutionary journey.
And that's right on the money. I think, you know, it's a practice,
Right,
right?
exactly.
And well, we might as well. So I'm going to put a pin in this. The workshop that Gary and I are working on for November 11th at the beautiful, incredible land that I've spoken of, that Antonia Albano has. Antonia is on the call tonight in Virginia. The incredible place, blessed place, energetically, incredibly charged. But Gary and I are going to do a Graceful Passages workshop there. So Graceful Passages does deal with transitions of all kinds, transitioning not just into death, but all kinds of changes. There are many, many ways in our lives that we are confronted, right, with time to take a 90-degree turn that way, time to take a 90-degree turn that way. How am I going to do that? Whatever. And you know, we have tools for this, because as we build the muscle, as we build a response system really in ourselves for dealing with these changes, which I call peduncles, these squeeze points, and we start to see them framed as squeeze points that are intended to evolve us. They're as you quoted to me years ago, these things happen for us, not to us.
Crucial.
And that little flip of thinking, this squeeze is happening, and we have tools for getting through the peduncle a little bit more elegantly, a little bit more gracefully. And the more we build that, when the time comes for us to transition out of this, human suit, we're going to be doing it a little better. That's the hope, right? That's the promise.
Exactly. I actually want to create an experience. I have this allergy with when the air is all filled with talking. I literally start feeling like everything gets kind of dry and I need to irrigate it with some direct experience. So not that I'm feeling anything wrong with our conversation. I have a fault that loses, like, it's almost like an avatar when you start grasping for air, because I need to have some music kind of to irrigate our experience. So I want to play something if I can, for all of us. And it's the perfect thing to play for yet another definition of acceptance that I hadn't thought of. So we mentioned 4 or 5 already. And that is, some of us, like me, have been wired to really be uncomfortable with getting acknowledged and loved and appreciated and accepted that way. So when someone radically accepts you to the point where they're actually loving and appreciating you, I've been much better at giving praise in my childhood, in my life, than I am accepting, although I've had a lot of practice accepting praise in the last 20 years because things have been growing for me in terms of the world finding meaning in my work. It's been very rewarding in that way. But I want to ask each of you to do this exercise with your eyes closed. And I'd like you to follow the instructions that he's going to guide you into doing an exercise with your hands on your shoulders. And when you listen, I just want you to let me see, there's a little pointer about this. Oh yeah, he's talking specifically to the healthcare provider, but I want you to imagine that you are, by the very nature of you being on this call, all of you, you are officially an eco-visionary healthcare provider. You are a stand for integrative wellness, because the spirituality evolutionary piece is the piece that most people ignore and don't pay attention to. The fact that you're on this call means you're a force, a frequency for good and for light and for love in the world you're in. Otherwise, you wouldn't be attracted to hope. So, in the spirit of that, if they talk specifically about they're talking to nurses, but just imagine that you're an eco nurse of the human spirit. Like you're a stand for beauty, and just experience. This practice that I developed called graceful passage, called alchemical wisdom, and I'd love you to experience this as a way to appreciate the power of self love and self acceptance. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. See you on the other side.
We don't just have jobs. We have callings. We have gifts. And we have the power to help people go to sleep at night and wake up in the morning with their mind and soul intact. How many people get to go to work every day and really get to make a contribution to another person's life? How many people get to make someone smile, feel better, cherish the next moment? That's what we get to do. Your life as a caregiver is an unfolding journey in exploring your world of possibilities. To those people you touch every day, you are their light of hope. I'd like to invite you in this moment to take your right hand and place it on your left shoulder. And your left hand and place it on your right shoulder. And imagine the embrace you would feel if every person that you had given care to in your life added their hands to your shoulders. In front of you, and behind you. You would begin to receive from all the people's lives that you have been the light of possibility for, held up by their thank yous, by their appreciation, and by their love. So any moment when you feel you need that extra special thank you, simply remember every person that you have given care to in your life. You are the light of possibility for the people you serve. Thank yourself for choosing to be a caregiver.
I love the reframing that accepting this journey in the human 3D manifest world is tantamount to accepting that we're here to serve one another.
Yeah.
Period. Period.
Yeah.
Period. And therefore, this distinction that I should play this only for nurses, at this time when things have gotten so outrageous and cacophonous and ridiculous and dangerous, just it requires us to kind of deputize all of ourselves as being caregivers for one another, agents of love and service and care. So this distinction that it's just for nurses, I love spreading this. Imagine, instead of all the people you serve, all the people you love and are connected to, because we're all interconnected in the field together as one heart, one being. So I just love playing that, because do you feel in the room, in the energy of the circle of the fire we're in now right now, that when you share something that tender and you get all kind of yummy in yourself around remembering all the people you've touched, I just love doing that. That's just one of my favorite things to do.
It's very powerful. I thought it got very crowded in the room here during it. I'm sure everybody felt that. Like, wow, lots of folks around. It's a beautiful piece, absolutely beautiful, and so tender. And we need it, because no matter what, we're taking care of something. We're taking care of an animal. We're taking care of our plants. We're taking care of our neighbors. We're always doing
Well,
something.
and the big thing that's happened for me recently that is giving me the exciting transition of showing up for myself is that I'm finally learning how to take care of my inner child.
Ah,
And I like the phrase that means the most to me these days is the only unconditionally loving parent, mother and father I'll ever have in this life resides inside of me. And so it's my responsibility to find him, the inner mother and father, so that I can attend to the wounded one that never got what he needed as a child.
right.
And that happens every morning now that I'm swimming. I get in, I swim for the first time, 5 every weekday, thanks to the reading I got with Hope when we were at Rancho La Puerta, and had this extraordinary blessing through her eyes from a high being. And then I started swimming the next day and I never stopped. That was 8 weeks ago. And as I walk into the pool, literally I'm learning how to entrain my relationship to my inner father and my inner mother, who's showing up at being there incrementally. Yeah, go ahead, jump in the water, go ahead. You can do this. You can get up at 6 a.m. You can do this, come on, get out of bed, go ahead, And that takes self-acceptance.
Well, that's what I want to talk about that a little bit, because there was a flip, and I know that the reading and the energetic gift that you got was the catalyst, perhaps. But
Not perhaps. Irrefutably, it was the catalyst.
Okay. And there was something, there was a moment of acceptance in you about what needed to be done. You know, I don't know, it may have given you the ability to truly face something, you know, and then do your surrender and then take your action steps. So was that something that happened afterwards, or how did that happen? Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember exactly. What I'm amazed with about the evolutionary journey is that what requires work is often so hidden from our purview,
Yeah.
of like a filmy layer that is obstructed by the addictive habitual needs of the ego to keep things in place that have gotten comfortable with a lower frequency,
Yeah. Well said.
just simply because it's familiar,
That's
right?
right.
And I have had the longest running uh, bummer in my nervous system. I was like, I have to say, it's the most productive in some ways, because it has been highly, like, all my creative acts have been, the analogy I'm thinking is this sort of like on this big vat that's lubricated with the oil on the side. There was nothing to grab onto. So all my creative acts were trying to grab for something. And I have something that will get me out of this negative loop of looking at what was missing, look what was wrong, look what's wrong with me, look at how all the judge and jury for all the reasons I'm not good enough or I'm not right, that there's something wrong with Gary. And if you just could find out what was wrong with me. And then that blessing happened. And the next morning, it created like a Velcro between me and it that didn't exist before. No, like it separated. Like, you know, when a film separates, you thought it was completely over the iPhone, and then you pull the film. Turns out it was there all the time. You didn't know. That's what happened to me. All of a sudden, this little thing presented itself. I went, "What is that film?" And I pulled it, and it was this story I kept on telling people around my money situation. And this voice in the pool the next day, as I told you, Hope, this voice said, "You may never tell anyone ever again, ever, ever again around your money situation." And all of a sudden, this higher intelligence went, "Oh, I'm colluding with Gary. Something's wrong with Gary every time I tell this story. What would happen if I didn't reinforce it with the power of my word?" All the books that I've learned and law of attraction, it's all true. There's no accident. They call words spells. And sentences. You sentence yourself to the things you spell with your words that determine the frequency of your experience. And I was completely and utterly guilty of the guy in the hand with the cookie jar reinforcing my negative frequency and what's wrong with Gary in every step of my life for the last few years, maybe even my whole life on some level, actually. So now it gets interesting. What music's going to come out of here?
Yeah.
It's a whole different. It's related directly to this thing that I wanted to share with you around service being the path to ultimate liberation and happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Serving other people's happiness is the thing you grow up into recognizing there's no other more important reason to be here.
Yeah.
And when you get that as more than just I should do this, or they say I should do it, or my ego would want to be important and see that I'm seen that way. And actually, when it really lands in like, well, what else is there to do?
Yeah.
With all this going on around us. So it's so interesting. I have never talked on Zoom publicly. I want to make sure I see everybody now. This is so private and intimate and personal. And I just want to see all of your faces, because before it's just like, I've never really talked about this publicly, you know, but it's like the most important thing to talk about, which is how do we become the liberated protagonist in our own story? that actually enjoys the ride.
Yeah.
I wasn't enjoying the ride. I was looking through the glass like those old Dickens movies, trying to rub in and say, boy, they're sure having a good time in there. How come I can't do that? I was just always the guy that felt left out. Which is astounding when you think about how many people love me and appreciate me and how much work has been celebrated and all that. But my internal, intimate, tender experience of Gary was mostly feeling left out and not good enough.
I want to just pause for a second here and ask people to please raise your hand or put up your little icon hand if you relate to what Gary just said. Not feeling good enough. Fiona has two hands. Not feeling, not enjoying the ride. All of these things. I think, it is, and this is something I picked up along the way. I was like, you know what? It's not just me. This is the human condition.
Right.
This is the
Well,
human
and
condition.
because of the legacy of the standards of parenting that have been passed on for literally millennia that were so abusive and traumatic and inappropriate for the tenderness of children.
Yeah.
This is one of the reasons why I'm so excited about the Birthing the New Humanity app.
Yeah.
If you go to online, the iPhone app store has it. It's Birthing the New Humanity. And Julie Gerland is the woman, Gerland. She invited me to write a chapter on methods for more conscious conception, pregnancy, and birth. I mean, I'm just a composer. How did I get in a place like this? But I did a bunch of work with Lisa Raffel on deepening the bonding process in pre and perinatal women. And that's led to the musical that we're creating that is really about the celebration of the miracle of life and the power of love. It's really what it is about love. The musical that we talked about it today, Hope, the musical is about the power of love.
Yeah.
And the importance of love being the only thing there is. But it's such a cliche. How can you sell a musical based on that? It's so generic, right? But what I wanted to say is that's why I'm so in love with the Birthing the New Humanity, because Julie Gerland says we can create heaven on earth if every child in utero and every pregnant woman is reviewed is thought of as a sacred site, so that the minimum of emotional, spiritual, physiological hunger can happen, so a baby can know that they're loved and a baby can come into a family knowing they belong. And that anatomically forms differently in the brain, so you don't look through the eyes of fight, flight, and other as a threat. And we're talking right down to the nub of the very beginning of life itself, right? But the other corollary to that is that it's that, or it's the reparenting ourselves with the only unconditionally loving parents we'll ever have. Because there is this very rare where you find people who have had completely healthy, functional childhoods, right?
Very rare. Yeah.
Very rare, very rare. So my interest has been, and now I'm like on fire with this. Now I feel like I'm so clear that what I'm doing and who I am and what I'm committed to is exactly what I signed up for and what I came here for. That is such a source of juice and excitement for me, where I get up in the morning and it's like, my biggest issue is how to parent the kid so that he doesn't overconsume and overcommit and overdo beyond my capacity, because I'm so excited and there's so many areas that I'm doing my work and serving it. But I know that I'm doing the right thing, because what I'm doing is I'm the perfect avatar. I have gone through this. I know really well, not only from not accepting myself, but also from being a human doing that's been running around with his chicken with his head cut off all the time, thinking that my meaning will come from who I am and what I've accomplished rather than, who I am based on my accomplishments and my external engagement. So I know that what I'm doing is about connecting the dots around the role music has in waking us up to what matters most and
Mm,
slowing us down to who we truly are.
mm, mm, mm. And that last little piece there, slowing us down so we can really connect with who we really are. And that is, I mean, that's what I feel when I listen to your music.
Mm.
I think that we all do. We it's like taking a nice cool shower. It's or a warm shower. You know, it's
Well,
just
and Jim came up with the favorite phrase. I haven't used it yet, but he said, Gary Malkin, the Mozart of meditation music.
this is my husband who's a marketer.
But yeah, that's one aspect of the commitment I've made in the last 10 years is the music I've created has been a lot about slowing me down.
Yeah.
And I'm the everyman because I know that everyone is running around like I am.
Yeah.
Most people.
Yeah. It's true. Just trying to keep up with a very speedy life,
Right.
you know. I want to just take a moment and see if people have some questions, some comments.
I love this chat. That is the path Luther Burbank, the great horticulturist inventor, spoke of. And that's beautiful. I didn't know that. Thank you, Leonore.
Fiona.
It's just beautiful what you've been saying, Gary. And what strikes me is you know, the importance of words when you talk about love being caring for each other. It's funny that the word tender also means to care for. And if I was to describe your music, I would say that it absolutely personifies tenderness. Do you know, it's like somehow it always touches me that way, and it's just deeply tender. So that you've been doing that all along. It's not that you haven't been doing it. You've been doing it all along. But the thing is now that your recognition of what it is you've been doing gives you back the reward and energy of seeing it, of knowing what you've been doing all along.
Exactly.
You know?
I love that. Oh, Fiona, you have no idea how relevant what you just said is also, because for 20 years in every one of my PowerPoints, I have a slide that talks about tenderness as the delivery system for evolutionary change and healing. Tenderness. It's the word. And ironically, how evolutionarily I came upon that is because it was what was missing so completely on every level in my life as a child. I had no tenderness, no presence, no one present, no tenderness, right? Except maybe with my older sister who was 3 years older than me. And I was like a 3-year-old's wet dream because she got to hold this living doll for the first 2 years of my life. But honestly, that I love that you said that, because the big, on that 10 days that I told you I had like the most amazing evolutionary awakening that I've ever had in like years, that happened in Guatemala for me around this self-acceptance piece. One of the pieces of the self-acceptance orgasm, if you will, the moment of aha, which was the night before we were leaving back for the States, I realized, like, whether it's true or not, it was just fascinating to even imagine this, that on some level I had this fantasy that the future Gary came back to my muse for the last 20 years and created these musical experiences that I thought were for everyone else, but they were for me. And took me 20 years to receive them for as what they were intended for, which was awakening tools for me to get tender with me. And when I saw the perfection of the universe, it's a lot more about that story that I've got to write it in my book. So I got to tell the story of that. It's one of those stories that you can't even believe it. It's so outrageous. But when I imagined the ecosystem intelligence that would create the tools within which 20, 30 years later, something was planted that I finally got what it was for. And it was for me to be an instrument of love that would refine my ability to do it even more in a way that I could be a part of rather than feel apart, separated from, So I love that you said that, Fiona. Thank you. That's very rewarding for me.
Thanks, Fiona. Very beautifully said. Somebody else, you have a comment or a question for Gary? Patricia.
Gary, I'm very rarely speechless, as Hope will tell you. However, I must say, your vulnerability, knowing who you are, knowing what you've accomplished, what you've done, and your willingness to be vulnerable, to show us what's inside of you, what makes you who you are, your childhood, what you've experienced, the lack of love. And many of us have experienced the same thing in our own way, in different ways. However, you make it so that it was such a beautiful thing that we experienced, and the people that we experienced it with were the very people that we needed to help us to get to where we are now.
Isn't that remarkable? That the ones that served us the most were the ones that often caused us the most suffering.
Yeah.
They played a role. They chose. I'll never forget early in my friendship with Hope, when we were at a restaurant in New York, and you were talking about my father. You remember, Hope?
Mm-hmm.
And you said this sentence that was very much similar to what Patricia. It's in the realm of what Patricia just talked about. That my dad signed up for being the one that would be the agitator, that I would feel abandoned by, because he loved me so much. He knew that the only way I would grow is if I was fully abandoned by the male, so I'd have to find it somehow for myself. And I never thought of it that way before. And suddenly my heart opened to my father, and I went, God, is that true? But even just thinking it might be possible, it resonated. It felt accurate. So Patricia, yeah, it is such a mystery, and it's so beautiful how it really is so divinely orchestrated. And that's where acceptance comes in again. And I just got this book. I don't even know if it's good, but it's called Faith. I don't know, you can't see it because of the blur. There, Faith. And I'm suddenly really interested in faith, especially after what happened with me, with the blessing you gave me, Hope. Because my next evolutionary step is building an irrefutable, rock solid faith in my connection to Source that has always been sketchy.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I'm learning incrementally in the pool how I'm being held by the feminine, heart-centered water, it's almost like I'm like the hieroglyphics of Source are being understood sensorially as the language of Source that's trying to communicate its connection to me in a way that all this life I didn't get. I didn't understand. I didn't know the language it spoke. But I'm learning. I'm literally beginning to learn about the language of how faith gets transmuted and experienced. And it's the first time I've even said those words, Patricia, but it comes to mind when you say that, it's like the roles that the ones have played that have caused so much suffering could be the most profound agents of the divine,
I asked God a long time ago, why did you drop me into this dysfunctional family?
Right, me too.
Then when I realized that my mother and father agreed to let me come through them so that I could learn from them, that totally changed everything. Suddenly I was in a place of gratitude.
I know.
My mother wasn't even married at the time that she got pregnant, and then got married 6 months later. And I thought, how could that have happened? Why did I ever do that? But then I realized that was exactly what I needed to learn. And God bless the two of them, because it wasn't easy for them.
Right.
God bless them for letting me do that.
I tell you, when you can find a place of gratitude for the exactly what happened as divinely orchestrated, perfectly designed for your evolutionary liberation,
Hmm.
that's freedom.
That's it. That's it. And that's that little flip. It's not happening to you, but for you.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I'm so honored, Hope, that you would ask me to engage in this level of this frequency of engagement because it's perfect timing. You know, 10 days after I started doing my laps on the pool, you can't make this stuff up. Who writes these scripts? 10 days after I started taking my little hand, little Gary, to the pool, as I'm like, you know, I get a local church that I never performed at or spoke at. They asked this woman to speak on the divine feminine, not realizing that they asked this person to speak on the divine feminine on Father's Day. And 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 so that this culture, this church had denied the masculine so much and it had accentuated the power of the ascending divine feminine, which is going on in our culture so much right now, that they didn't even know it was Father's Day. So the woman who was a friend of mine who was asked said, "It's Father's Day. You should ask Gary to talk about the divine feminine." Well, I mean, divine masculine. Well, have I ever spoken at a church about the divine masculine? No, but it was a divine appointment. And it was 10 days after I started, I had the presence of that tiny little, like those trees, that are wrapped around with a green little fence to protect. I was like that little tree that just went, this changes everything now that I have a relationship with my inner father. Oh my God, I have something to say. And I hit it out of the park because it wasn't me. It came through me. And who plans these things? I mean, it was literally asking me to come forward. And I feel similarly about this call, like, because we teach to learn, that's Jeff Patnode's beautiful phrase about the habits of heroes. So when we're invited to talk about something that we might just have just begun to understand, what a gift, because we're reinforcing and regrounding and deepening our understanding on multiple levels of what's actually really happening to us. So anytime you have the opportunity to tell someone about what you're going through, I just want you to, and by the way, I want to invite you all to do this practice because it's been a part of my life for the last 30 years. And honestly, I'm a different person because of it. It's a technology developed by a guy named Stan Dale, who founded the Human Awareness Institute. And he's famous for these love, sex, and intimacy workshops where it's the most profound place you can heal traumas and wounds related to relational intimacy. And he has like 9 levels and it gets very explicit, but you can even just take the first or second workshop and have an amazingly transformational experience. But what he shared with me was this technology that he calls the heart share. And he has a bunch of classical rules about it, but you can do it on the phone. And I have 3 friends that I hope being one of them, that we do it all the time. We just compress it because we like to catch up personally without the structure. But the format is elegant and beautiful. And it gives you a chance to actually, it's not quite teach, but it's kind of a branch from the tree of teaching, which is you step back. And then the format is on the phone. You start with silence, whether it's a minute or 10 minutes or 20 minutes, commensurate to how much time you have. And if you're in person, you'll put a candle between you, and you just look at the flame, and you decide how many minutes you have and how many minutes that other person has. And after the meditation, after the silence, and if you go first, you stop and you ask, if I had a 20,000-foot view of my life and of life in general, like God's view of Gary's life, what wants to be said right now? What needs to be said? What needs to be shared that could give it some oxygen from the worms underneath the ground that live in my unconscious? What wants to be said? And invariably, what gets said is so healing, because it gets, when 2 or more are present and when someone sees and witnesses and hears without, the rule is you can't say anything. It's one-sided communication. So for however long you've agreed, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 minutes, you have to just listen with an agreement implicit that you don't later say, by the way, you know that thing you said? You can't do that. You can maybe later, if you are really close, say, that thing you said, are you open to letting me comment on that? But it's for beginners on HeartShare, it's off rules. It's not allowed. You're not, because we always have something to say about what each other says. And the idea of literally having it be untouchable, where all they did was hear what you had to say, talk about an acceptance cultivation tool. I'm so glad I'm getting to share this. Hope, you want to say anything about that, HeartShare?
About HeartShare?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I just think it's that last little piece that you said, this idea that you're just receiving and that you have this freedom to just be heard and nothing else. That is so beneficial. So beneficial. It's
And
just,
again, it's parenting again. It's
Yeah.
the seeing, it's the holding, it's the space tending. It's
Yeah.
all the things that most of us never got as children.
right.
So this is a very, it's also going to be in my book. It's one of the key, someday I'll do this book. Maybe it'll never be a real book. Who knows? But it's one of the key components in my evolutionary journey that I couldn't be who I am without HeartShares on a
Right.
regular basis.
Right. Right. Well, it's a good thing for everybody to try. And most people who have had private sessions with me or done a workshop with me, we always start with an infinity wave between us. So
Yeah, right. That's perfect.
Right. And that just levels the playing field, gets us both on a high frequency of love and compassion. And from there, we'll have a much more elevated conversation.
And now I'm learning that when you can find a piece of music that resonates with an energy or an emotion or a theme that feels current in your life, it's like the infinity wave in the sense that it creates a container
Yeah.
that accelerates mutual benefit
Yeah.
for evolutionary development.
Right. Beautiful. Beautiful, Gary.
Yeah.
So let me just see. Gary has a wonderful thing that he's going to do for us at the end, but I wanted to just make sure, see if there are other comments or other questions.
Look who's on the call, Jeff Padnog.
I know, your buddy.
One of my mentors and beloved friends who
Yeah,
knows more about faith than anyone I know.
that's right. That's why he was our faith infinite wisdom guest.
Yeah. Yeah, I've gotten so much from experiencing Jeff's relationship to his God or to God in general that it's just been profound. So I love you, Jeff. So nice to see you here, wherever you are.
I'm here, Gary.
Oh, great.
Nice to hear your voice, Jeff. Anybody else have a comment or question for Gary? Yeah, Karen.
I'd like to say that piece that he started with that he said was for the nurses and for the caregivers with that practice. I have to say that I appreciate it from, my thing of being not a nurse, but a caregiver of my little children, other people's little children, my elderly mom, other people's elderly moms, caregiver, to the extent that at one point I got myself a watch saying I am a retired caregiver. It wasn't a professional thing. It was just a life thing.
Right.
But it was. And this thing with being held, when a few years back, my husband died, and then a year later, my son died. And of course, the word, I could only use the word of how much I felt held. I was just held.
Wow.
People did this, people did that, people brought this, people brought that.
Wow.
So many different ways. But the only word I could ever really find was that I felt held. And it was almost like it was visceral.
Mm.
So I believe from experience that that's what you're saying, when you've been the caregiver and whoo. So That was a great, and I love that it's,
Yeah. Well, and again, that's that, Karen, that's that tenderness. You know, I have a dear friend, Ernie, who's also one of the most faith-based individuals I've ever known. His relationship with Christ is so unusual. And he said, you don't have a personal, intimate relationship with God that makes you like God is, you know, in my image, right? That they, you know, like a best friend God. I went, what the hell are you talking about? Like, what? You know, for me, it's trees and nature. But suddenly in the last few years, it's actually coming in as being held by a tenderness that's so intimate. And I just never knew that was one of the ways God is known and felt. But that's what I'm starting to feel in the pool every morning. I get in the pool and I literally hear a voice, hey there, you know, like I'm holding you, I welcome, you know, like, so that's beautiful, Karen. Yeah, I love the way you just described that held. It's beautiful.
yeah.
And you were really astute enough to notice it. You were so sensitive to it.
Right.
And, you know, yeah.
Like
And-
you
and-
said, the room was crowded.
Exactly. And Karen, you're really another great example of somebody who has worked with radical acceptance for those two major events, you know, that ricocheted your life around. And I saw you working with that acceptance from the get-go, because I was with you both times. It's as strange luck would have it. And
But you know, oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
no, Karen is somebody who comes to mind also as somebody who really has mastered some acceptance, major acceptance.
That's beautiful. Based on the time factor, I had another thing planned before our ending piece, Hope,
Uh-huh.
but it's about 4 minutes long. And it's about another interpretation of acceptance, which is the ability to build your capacity to hang out in healthy grief, to build your muscle to tolerate the practice of grieving in a way that doesn't consume you. You know, that it's about bearing witness, you know. So it might not be where we want to go, but it's a piece of music that I wrote for a film that I scored in '98 that just has inside of its DNA. It's a piece I imitated Johann Sebastian Bach's style in honor of the people who died at Auschwitz. But the piece of music is I'm starting to look back at my body of work for the last 40 years. And all of a sudden this piece was like, oh, this was for this film, but you know what it is? It's a piece of medicine to do what I was saying about, like, instead of the infinity wave, you can use a piece of music as a container for accelerating a certain quality, you know. So we don't have to do that. I just have it available, but we can end soon. And if that's the case, we'll just go to the one we had planned.
Well, let me just take a show of hands. But one thing I was going to ask you, Gary, is it possible to share that caregiver link?
Yeah.
Is that possible so everyone could have that as something they could download or?
Well, so I'm happy to send you that MP3
Okay.
for you to share. And I want to invite everyone to go to my website to download the album that it's from if you want all of them.
Perfect.
It's called Care for the Journey 1 and 2, that are messages for caregivers. And if you're able to extrapolate when they talk about caregivers as more of a generic sense of caregiving for the world or for your children or for the people you love, and and that doesn't get in the way. It was designed for healthcare professionals, but I find it these days that it's really important to start assuming that role that we're all caregivers now, because we need to be.
Yeah.
We all need to show up for one another right now. and not reinforce that separation. So I'll send that to you with an invitation that you can not only download Care for the Journey from my album, from my store, but when you sign up for my newsletter, all kinds of gifts can come to you through these newsletters. This letter that comes, I send these letters that will give you gifts with each time. So there's like about 9 letters that come, and then I won't bother you because I'm promising myself I'm going to do a monthly newsletter, but I'm not as disciplined as Hope is, and she's got phenomenal discipline to do your beautiful newsletters as you do on a weekly basis. It's amazing.
Well, I've just retired from weekly. I'm just doing monthly now. But so I put Gary's website in there. And also, if you, I think, and I've said this many times, so sorry to repeat myself, but I believe that graceful passages should be in everybody's library. You never know when you're going to need it. And as I said, and we will explore in our wonderful workshop, it's not just for transitioning out of this life. It is for any kind of peduncle you find yourself in, or somebody in your life finds themselves in. It's the most beautiful thing. And that's how I initially met Gary. I met him on a little copied, sorry to say it, CD from my minister. And it just said Graceful Passages on it. It had no Gary Malkin or anything like that. And my mother had died, and I put this thing on. Jim and I listened to it from front to back. It didn't have the beautiful images that they now have to go along with it, but I didn't know what I was missing. We were so blown away by this thing, and I just cried. I smiled. I opened it.
Oh, that's so beautiful to hear that.
It was such a thing. And then, we end up being best buds, years later.
Oh, and not only that we ended up having this revelatory moment on your couch where we recognized that our purpose in this life was to help people navigate through the process of accepting their mortality as a path to being fully alive, right? Yeah. In the evolutionary journey. And this is a great time to just say a little bit more about the workshop, which is that was that moment on the couch. When we looked at each other, I went, "You mean like you too?" I felt like appointed, like a life appointment, like a destiny thing. And she went, "Oh yeah." And I went, "Okay, then let's create a Graceful Passages workshop." And we shook on it. It's like 7 years ago. Yeah. And now we're doing it. It took 7 years to make it happen. So what this workshop is a perfect marriage of music and the infinity wave to navigate how do we really do live a life that is filled with grace and flow and gratitude and a navigating resilience that will allow that to be your experience more of the time than not. I don't want to say, oh, forever. I'm saying your propensity to navigate and turn lemons into lemonade will be enhanced by this workshop, and probably more than that. And our goal is to create an experience for people where the freedom of turning into the skid of their fears and avoidances of the skids of, that downhill skiing, the tendency in downhill skiing is to not turn towards the thing that they say you need to do when you're navigating a turn. It's so much like that. The thing we are intuitively avoiding is the thing we have to turn into. And who knew that by focusing in on our fears and avoidance of death and dying and loss, that it would be the portal to awakening to the best version that we want to be of ourselves and the best lens through which we can navigate life. Yeah, that's what this workshop's going to be. Yeah, and I'm excited about it.
I am too. I am so excited. It's going to be beautiful. I think it's going to, and we're going to be held. Just one last sweep. Anybody, anything else you want to say to the man of the hour?
I just want to hear Jeff Patnode say one sentence.
What would that sentence be about, Gary? Just to say.
You're the inspirational speaker, buddy.
I can commend the work of these two, having experienced it many times, and the combination will be electric and deep. So I plan to actually send a whole bunch of people to this workshop who are grieving currently, and I hope I might be able to attend myself.
Oh my
Woo!
gosh.
Thank
That would be just so amazing. Such an honor.
Wow. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
You bet.
And somebody wants to know the music mentioned Gary on Grief. What is the name, please? So somebody put that in the. It's not only Graceful Passages and Unspeakable Grace. Unspeakable Grace is the instrumental music, but really every piece of music that I've written for contemplative sacred space in the last few years is perfect for grace. It's like a shawl for the heart that slows down enough for your natural capacity to cultivate your inner parent that will comfort you. So that's what you need during grief. You need to awaken your natural capacity to build that inner unconditional father, mother for the little child that's hurting inside, which often gets really, really obvious when someone that we love dies, or someone we love might die. It's a scary place sometimes. So that includes the album Stillness and Winter Faith, and there's all kinds of albums for that purpose. But Graceful Passages and Unspeakable Grace, I recommend downloading. And you can get it wherever music is sold, or on my website. I get more money for it, but it doesn't. Whatever you choose.
One last thing. When you go to Gary's website, he has these little musical postcards, right?
Oh, I forgot. Oh my God. Thank you for remembering, Hope. Yeah, they're called
they're free, I think, aren't they?
They are wisdom films. We never really launched it officially. and they're what they were designed for was to use the multisensory tools of spoken word, music, and beautiful nature images in 30 seconds to tell someone in your life you love them, or that you wish them happy birthday or happy anniversary. But it's really about, for no reason at all, to reach out and connect and acknowledge people in your life. And there's 60 to choose from. I had the dream of doing this in 2004, and I got sidetracked and ran out of money. And then I finally did it 20 years later. So it's beautiful. And we haven't really launched it to the public yet. So I'd really love it if you guys tried it out and let us know if there was any problems in it, because I want it to work for everyone. So yeah, thank you for remembering that, Hope. Well, you guys, thank you for the privilege of being vulnerable and articulate and expressive about things I haven't really ever talked about publicly. And thank you so much for the honor and the privilege of doing it in such a safe space. The field that Hope cultivates is just high frequency safety and tenderness and belonging. I love you so much, Hope, and I'm so lucky that you're my friend and my ally. Thank you, dear.
Well, I feel the same way, and just blessed beyond measure. And this beautiful tribe, as we've just come together. We call it, we've built our raft. We've just going down the river together, and it's really comforting. It's a comforting community. So thank you, everybody, and much love to you all. Much love. And Gary, you were just brilliant tonight. Thank you. I think we all feel a little different than we did when we started.
I was thinking about how Jeff must see me now. He met me about 12 years ago, and I was a very different person then. So it's lovely to be on the journey with you all. And may the rest of your day and week and summer be wonderful. And I hope we see some of you at the workshop in November.
Yeah, me too. All right, friends. Mwah. Big hug and kiss.